I'm going to go back to that same study, and now I'm not going to pay much attention to the reference, although we have it up here. I'm going to use my first study as reference because I'm not trying to make the drawing better. I'm trying to make the overall design. And if I'm not happy with the color's better. So I'll reference back to the image for a little bit of help or assurance there every once in a while. But I just want to clean this up. So now one of the things I try and look for, let me maybe use this, is notice that I could take this and this, go down to this little plane before the mountain, and I could take this and I could take this, and they're all very, very equal. And notice that in here I've got, this little bit of yellow and this yellow framing that. That lines up with that. That lines up with where the mountain peaks up that way, and the whole peak of the mountain is rather close to our shrubbery here, so that's lining up too much. So we don't have a very interesting composition. And there's lots of little dabs and notations trying to remind myself of the reference, where a bush is, where a color note is, and they're rather inartful the way they've been put down. Some of the good qualities about it is all these kind of loose watermark. I got that inner red there, and then I get that outer blue, and then I get the outer green, and that bleeds into a orangey yellow. And so those kind of moving into a very kind of painterly gradation of stepping wash over wash over wash, and kind of the bullseye technique is the way I think about it. I work with a bigger and then come in towards the center to get to the highlight or get to the dark core of a shadow or a local color. And by doing that in an organic way, it's fresh. I can always blend it out in the rendering, but letting that be loose and experimental and maybe surprising, coming up with something new. I always think of the mall paintings. You go to a mall as a young man or a kid or something, and you look, and outside the store of the mall is this scene where you've got the waves crashing on the beach with the moon and the lights cutting through the back of the moon at sunset or close to sunset. And you go, whoa, look at that, isn't that cool? And then you look in the window and there's about 56 other ones almost exactly the same. And then you find out that they were done in a factory where one guy is the wave painter, one guy does the foamy water, another does the moon, and they're kind of just production pieces. I don't want that to happen in my work in any form. So I'm constantly using my sketchbook to try and force invention, to be a little out of control, or to switch mediums or switch techniques within the medium to come up with surprises that might be useful. This might be a great way to put in the inner, deepest, most shadow of that bush. So rather than doing bushy branches and bushy strokes, I might use this kind of watermark kind of core that's really kind of craggy organic that suggests that in a shape-based way rather than a linear stroke way. So always looking for possibilities on that. Now keep in mind what we're doing here is a third or a fourth, I've lost count now, sketchbook. So again, you could create a whole sketchbook just on this, just on color notations, little thumbnails of landscapes or figures in the studio or figures out in the park or still lives, any kind of compositional stuff where you're going to start taking the value and now putting temperature and intensity on top of it. So anyway, let's go ahead and see if we can't do this again and do a better job of it. Let me grab a paper towel here so I can dry that out a little bit. And I'm going to work with the dirty paint I already have, and then I'll come back as needed, if needed. and make adjustments. I'm going to use a bigger brush and I'm going to work cruder. And I'm actually looking at the wrong one. I started to look at that one. I got to look at that one. My head's still in my lunch. I ate too much for lunch, so my head's in my stomach. Let's try that again. So I screwed it up. That means I can do one of two things. I can start over, or I can try and adjust the screw up. And I prefer to adjust the screw up because I'm a little lazy, and because that might just be the thing to create a happy accident. So what will happen if I try and force that more of the red purples and blue greens more into that subtler green and kind of sage green, I guess, and then the blue purple accents in there. So let's find out. And then I'm going to make the and here I am going to look a little bit at the reference. I'm going to make the mountains a little different color, and I'm going to push them up here. And notice I've left space between so this doesn't bleed in like it did before. That'll speed things up a little bit. And we'll see when that dries out where we end up with what we end up with. Okay, and then I'm going to do the mountain range there. And you can put in several different yellows, let's say. And that will make it seem more rendered, more sophisticated. One of the things I didn't like was the shadows. They're much too strong on the mountains. So we'll make those just barely in those kind of dry desert mountains. We'll make them just barely separated. And notice my barely separation as it dries now gets darker and darker and darker, and it's not so barely anymore. So now I need to lighten that up maybe a little bit. So I'm going to do this and correct. And then I'm going to wet my brush, clean it off, take most of the water off, and take back some of that pigment off there. Now notice it kind of reverses the values. It makes the shadows lighter than the surrounding scape rather than darker. Hopefully that will dry down and reverse back as it goes. If not, then I come back, and since it's sitting on the surface, I can wipe that back a little bit and pull that. I'm always curious. I don't always put it in the paintings, but I almost always put it in studies like this. I'm always curious about gradation, so I'm going to take the blue sky and gradate it this way. And notice there's next to no change, but again, it will probably dry a little darker. If not, I'll do it again and again until I get what I want out of it in terms of value. Now I can wipe this off, or let me be clear on that. I can just load this with water and then soften that edge. I could also load this with water and fill up this shape of color I put in there. And that will force a stronger water marking like I had up here, especially since I've got my tilt going. Ginny wants to know how to draw trees. Trees are tough, and I'm not a landscape guy, really. I've got one of the 2 series I want to do is one of them's landscapes. And I've done them, of course, but I've never been known for that. I've never done tons of them. I'm grabbing another paper towel on the floor here, excuse me. And so I'm not the best, the expert on that, but I'll tell you the basic thing is designing, as we have up here, designing a interesting shape. If you look at Franklin Booth that we looked at earlier, or Granville Redmond, who did a lot of cypress type trees in Southern California. Granville, I think that's how you spell Granville. Beautifully designed shapes. And so if you look at the loose painters, I'm going to go against that in a second, but go look at the loose painters and you'll see these beautiful shapes, and then they'll do what's called sky holes, where they'll take, the sky and punch a hole in the tree to show the break of the leaves, or they'll do flyaways, where they'll take the shape of the tree and making it an interesting vignette, as we talked about in our pen and ink section. And this is kind of small for it. It'd be too small to really want to do it. But you can pick up a few flyaways, like leaves coming off the tree, or very, very thin branches that you can't see the connection for those. The other thing you can do is you can start out with the mass. This is a plein air painter's trick. So you get some sky holes going on there, get some flyaways, add some other sky holes in there. Let's say like this. And then you can come back in on top of that silhouette and draw the trunk with a few of the branches, and then let that fade back in to the surrounding values. And the deeper shadows. And you can leave that loose, or you can blend it back, or you can really load this up. Let's load this up here. And then add a lot of water to get that watermark kind of action. And you can, if you got that light sky behind, you can allow the leaves. I put some of the tree color into the sky color, and that feels like it's going back into that environment. We're getting that going on in this first one up here too, the first one on the left. So you can do that, and then I'll let that dry. Once that dries, then I'll come back and maybe add a little bit of light onto the tree. I'll show you that in a little bit. So let's go back over here, Brian. Or is it Lily? Lily, sorry. They look so much alike, I can't tell them apart sometimes. Joking, I'm kidding. Kidding. And we're going to add some richer red. We'll do a different red. Do the sunshine fire engine red, which is our Windsor red in this case. And to me, this is just play, just having fun. And so it's not always fun. It's sometimes you're frustrated because you say you're playing, but you're also working. You're trying to get an idea down on the page. You're trying to make the paint do some semblance of truth. It may not be the drawn truth, but some sense of the environment, of the mood. And it can be incredibly frustrating, of course, to try and fail at that again and again and again. You know, art's hard in that sense, but you try and keep in mind it's just a sketchbook, and that's one of the many, and in some ways one of the most important advantages of doing a sketchbook is that you can take the pressure off. You can talk yourself into believing it doesn't really matter because it's just a sketchbook, and that's valuable. You know, we don't want to be constantly thinking, "Oh my God, I'm a loser. I'll never be able to do this," kind of thing. And we all get in that place sometimes. You know, it's a tough place to be. It's a scary place to be. So we want in some way to take the pressure off and convince ourselves that we're doing just fine, and this isn't, all the marbles isn't right here. We've got other times and other places that we can deal with that. Okay, so that's a little better in terms of environment. In terms of proportions, compositional, just shape arrangement and such. Still broken in thirds, but it's opened up a little bit. It's varied a little bit. And maybe we'll do that to make the point even stronger. All right, so back to here now. I can come back and rub this back, pull that out to get a better watermark, and then I can also, or instead, either one, at some point I'm going to get off the stick and put more yellow out there, but not yet. Okay, so let's do that. That doesn't work very well, does it? But let it dry. And now I'm going to put more yellow out, I think. I'm going to use Brilliant Yellow. It's gouache. It's a little warmer than that Hansa yellow. That's a very cool Hansa. Usually Hansa's not that cool. So I would prefer it's a little oranger when I add it to the red. Okay, so I've let it dried, and then I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that, and I'm getting water and create a little gradation. And it's still not great, but you'll do that 2 or 3 times. We'll do it here. And then it's going to feel like a little bit of the brown bark, either light hitting it or just the brown, the golden brown or the sienna orange of it or whatever. We'll And notice I'm just kind of easing into the truth of it. Just the facts, as I used to say on the old TV show. And we don't know what the facts are quite yet. We think it's kind of green there. Well, that shape's kind of red. Well, that's kind of spindly. That's more robust. And so we search out the truth because it's a truth. Okay, then we'll let that dry. And I like to load those. Sometimes I'll put a brand new color. So I'm taking that blood red, that alizarin, and I'm loading it up in here. Maybe it's a different kind of warm vegetation. Maybe it's the earth coming through. Maybe it's a sunset light cutting through the trees from behind. Maybe there's some kind of warm cypress type shapes back there or something. And notice you can just indicate, and when it rings true, that didn't ring true. When it rings true, the audience will fill in on it for you. They'll tell you what it is. Oh, that's another tree of a different color back there. And I'm loading that up with water. I'm going to take almost all that pigment off, and they'll say, oh, that's another tree in the background. And you can just kind of invent these little things like this, of course, as I'm doing here. And sometimes you come up with something pretty cool. We're going to get into sketchbook drawing and painting, actually, painting in gouache. I'm going to show you how to use it very much as you would a watercolor, and then we're going to build on top of that to make it a little bit more unique style.
Steve Huston is an internationally renowned painter and draftsman who has worked for such clients as Caesar's Palace, MGM, Paramount Pictures, and Universal Studios, and has taught drawing and painting at Disney, Warner Brothers, Blizzard Entertainment, and DreamWorks Studios.
It really takes a tremendous amount of mileage to be excellent at any craft, and of course art is no different than that. With a sketchbook you have immediate gratification. If you've got 10 minutes, if you got an hour, you can sit down. Even 5 minutes you can do a little bit in the sketchbook, as opposed to the easel and the canvas. You feel like you need 3-4 hours to work. So I have that sketchbook with me all the time. I find a couple minutes here and there to use it. It becomes my great friend. I'm going to show you how to make it your best friend as well. Let's get started.